Ever feel like you're just on the edge of unlocking a better version of yourself?
Oh, totally. Like you just need the right tools or something.
Exactly. Well, that's what we're diving into today. Neuroscientist Andrew Huberman's new book, Protocols.
Oh, yeah, I've heard the buzz. Isn't it supposed to be like the ultimate guide to optimizing your brain and body?
Basically, yeah. He's taken years of research and combined it with his own experiences to create this, like, practical blueprint.
No kidding. So it's not just theory, he actually uses this stuff himself.
Exactly. And trust me, there's some seriously valuable stuff in here, especially when it comes to things like light and sleep, even how we learn best.
Interesting. So where do we even start with all of that? It's a lot.
Well, Huberman talks about this one thing that he calls the master lever for our biology.
Mm.
And you might be surprised to hear it's light.
Really? Light? How so? I mean, I get it's important, but a master lever.
It controls so much more than we realize. We're talking alertness, hormone production, even skin health.
Wow. Okay, I had no idea it was that impactful. So, like, what's he actually recommend for making the most of light?
He's really big on getting morning sunlight, like ideally within the first hour of waking up.
First hour. Man, that's early.
I know, right? But it's all about setting your circadian rhythm, your internal clock for the day.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about those of us who, can't always get that perfect morning sunshine?
Huberman suggests things like using a SAD lamp or even a drawing light box, those super bright
Oh,
ones.
yeah, yeah, I've seen those. So it's like tricking your brain into thinking it's sunny even when it's not.
Exactly. All right, so we've got light covered, ready to move on to another essential.
Hit me.
Absolutely. We're talking about understanding how your brain actually absorbs and retains information. And a big part of that, and this is something that really jumped out at me, is this whole idea of offsetting forgetting.
Right, right. And that's such a powerful concept because, so much of the time we think about learning as just this process of stuffing information into our brains.
Right. Like our brains are just empty vessels waiting to be filled.
Exactly. But the truth is, our brains are actually wired to forget. Like, it's a feature, not a bug.
Oh, I like that. It's like our brains are constantly trying to declutter and make space.
Exactly. And so instead of just focusing on taking more in, we need to get smart about how we can actually hang on to that information for the long haul. And he was talking about the student who saw incredible improvements in their recall just by changing how they reviewed their notes.
Yeah. Interesting. So instead of rereading their notes over and over.
Exactly. That's what most of us do, right?
Yeah.
But this student started using this technique called active recall. Basically, they would close their notes and try to remember everything they had just read.
Oh, so forcing your brain to work a little harder.
Exactly. And the results were amazing. It turns out that active retrieving information, rather than just passively re-exposing yourself to it, actually strengthens those neural pathways and makes the learning stick.
I can see how that would work, like building a muscle. You don't get stronger by just looking at weights.
Precisely. You got to actually use those muscles, challenge them, and push them to grow. And it's the same with our brains.
Okay, so this all makes sense, but how can we actually put this into practice? I mean, we've all been there, right? You cram for a test, you think you aced it, and then a week later, poof, gone.
Right, and that's because just seeing the information over and over again can create this illusion of knowledge.
Yeah, you think you know it, but you don't really know it.
Exactly. So how do we combat that? Well, testing yourself is a super powerful tool. Like, even if it's just quick little self-quizzes as you go.
So rather than just rereading the chapter, try to summarize the key points from memory.
Exactly. Or turn those key concepts into flashcards. Or even better, try explaining it to someone else.
Right, because teaching something is a great way to solidify your own understanding.
Absolutely. So yeah, active recall, people, that's a game changer. And another key ingredient for making those memories stick is, drumroll please, sleep.
Sleep. Okay, I knew this was coming, but I'm still kind of amazed by how important sleep really is for our brains. Can never have enough tips for better sleep, am I right?
Tell me about it. Always trying to optimize my sleep game.
Well, Huberman's got a ton of great strategies in the book. One that really stood out to me, though, was his focus on temperature.
Temperature. Interesting. How does that play into sleep?
Apparently, your body temperature needs to drop by like 1 to 3 degrees to fall asleep and stay asleep.
Really? Had no idea that was a thing.
Yep. He actually uses one of those 8 sleep mattress covers, the ones that regulate temperature.
Wow, that's commitment. Guess it shows how serious he is about this stuff, though.
Definitely. And since quality sleep is so closely linked to our mental well-being, Huberman also advocates for something you might not expect: journaling.
Journaling. For real, I thought that was more of a, self-reflection thing.
It can be, But Huberman's talking about a very specific method.
Mm.
It's based on the work of Dr. James Pennebaker and involves writing for 15 to 30 minutes on 4 consecutive days.
4 days straight. That sounds intense. What are you supposed to write about?
It has to be about something stressful or even a traumatic experience that you've gone through.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we're getting deep with it.
Yeah, the idea is to really process those tough experiences. Pennebaker's research shows that this kind of structured journaling can actually lead to some incredible mental and physical benefits.
Like what? Give me the good stuff.
Well, we're talking about a stronger immune system, better sleep, maybe even fewer symptoms of depression. It's wild.
Wow. Okay, so basically a mental detox through journaling. I'm kind of into it.
Right, it's like shocking the system a little, which is funny because speaking of shocking the system, Huberman's a big fan of cold exposure.
Oh, yeah. Cold showers, ice baths, all that stuff.
Yep, all of it. He says it does wonders for your mood, your energy, even your immune system. Something about how it triggers those feel-good chemicals in your brain.
The dopamine and all that. Man, the things our bodies can do if we just know the right buttons to push.
Right. It's fascinating stuff. So far, we've got light, sleep, journaling, cold exposure. It's a lot to think about.
It is. So with all of these protocols in place, how do we make sure we can actually focus and, get stuff done?
Well, that's where Huberman's insights on dopamine really come into play. He's all about strategic dopamine management.
Okay.
So not just chasing those dopamine hits constantly, which is easy to do.
Yeah. Exactly. It's more about understanding how dopamine actually works in our brains. Like think about it when we're always getting hit with distractions, notifications, emails, whatever. Our dopamine system is basically getting overloaded.
It's true. It's like we're living in a dopamine casino 24/7. No wonder it's hard to focus.
Right. So Huberman talks about a couple key things. First, got to minimize those distractions as much as possible. Easier said than done, I know, but creating a workspace where you can really focus is huge.
Out of sight, out of mind, as they say.
Yep. And then the second thing, he's a big fan of this thing called non-sleep deep rest. Have you heard of that? NSDR?
Oh, yeah. NSDR, I have heard of it. It's supposed to be amazing for stress and just generally helping your brain work better, right?
There's some seriously interesting research behind it. And for people who, aren't so great at just sitting still and meditating, NSDR can be a really good alternative.
That makes sense. So speaking of focus and discipline, though, didn't Huberman get into all this partly because of his background in skateboarding?
Totally. That's one of the most interesting things about him, honestly. Not your average neuroscientist backstory.
Not at all. So what's the connection there? How did skateboarding lead him to all this brain stuff?
Well, he was super into it from a young age, spent tons of time at this place called Oasis Skate Park. And he talks about how it taught him resilience, perseverance. You fall, you get back up, you try again.
Man, that's such a good metaphor for, well, everything, really.
And, he talks a lot about how his early experiences, even as a kid, kind of shaped his fascination with complex systems.
Yeah, he had that tropical fish tank.
The fish tanks. He was obsessed with those things, like creating these mini ecosystems, figuring out how all the different elements interacted.
He said it wasn't that different than the brain.
Exactly. And it wasn't just the fish tanks. He was also really into birds, like their flight patterns, how they navigated, all that stuff. He was always trying to understand how things worked, like peeling back the layers of complexity. And I think that curiosity, that drive to unravel those mysteries, it's something that's always been a part of him.
It's like those fish tanks were his first neuroscience lab.
Totally. And, it's funny because when you hear him talk about it, you can almost see that same kind of awe and wonder in his eyes. Even now, when he's talking about, the intricacies of the brain or the nervous system, it's like that same spark is still there.
Still geeking out about how things work.
Totally. And it seems like that whole mindset really stuck with him. But that's not to say it was all easy for him growing up. He's talked about how he went through some rough patches, right?
Yeah, he has. He spent some time in a treatment program when he was a teenager, which he's described as a turning point in his life. Must have taken a lot of courage to be so open about those experiences.
For sure. I think it says a lot about him, though. He's not afraid to be vulnerable, share his story.
No.
Which makes him way more relatable.
Oh, absolutely. It shows that everyone's got their own path, their own stuff they're working through. And sometimes those challenges are what end up shaping us the most. Kind of like how he talks about therapy now.
Oh, totally. He's a huge advocate for therapy. Credits it with helping him understand himself and his relationships better. Sees it as just another tool for growth, which I love.
It's great that he talks about it so openly, kind of helps to destigmatize mental health care. And it makes sense, too, given his whole approach. Like, if you can use tools and strategies to improve your brain and body, why not?
Exactly. It's all connected. And speaking of connected, we can't talk about Huberman without talking about fitness, right? The guy is seriously dedicated to physical well-being.
Seriously.
Hmm.
He's got that whole weekly routine that he follows religiously. Lay it on me. What's the Huberman workout plan look like?
Get ready, it's intense. Sundays, he goes for long duration endurance, like running, rucking,
Yeah.
anything to get that heart rate up for a good while.
Damn, starting the week off strong. What about the rest of it?
Mondays are all about leg resistance training. Then Tuesdays and Thursdays, it's rest or deliberate cold exposure. He loves his cold
I
exposure.
was going to say he had to make an appearance somewhere. So he really walks the walk with all this stuff.
Oh, yeah, he does. Wednesdays are for upper body resistance training. Then Fridays, it's high intensity interval training, HIIT, or sprints. And to round it all out, Saturdays are for arms, calves, and neck.
Okay, that is a schedule. Does he ever take a break?
He would say that rest is just as important. He talks a lot about listening to your body, taking time off when you need it, and he uses stuff like the physiological side to regulate his heart rate and relax, especially between sets.
The physiological sigh. That's the two inhales through the nose, one long exhale through the mouth, right?
That's the one. Such a simple technique, but crazy effective. And of course, Huberman's big on static stretching for flexibility and recovery, too. He's all about that mind-muscle connection, being present, moving with intention.
Right. It's not just about going hard all the time. It's about finding that balance with recovery,
Yeah.
mindfulness,
Mm.
the whole package.
Exactly. Building a sustainable practice that makes you feel good mentally and physically.
It's really cool to see how he brings all of this hardcore science back to like actual personal growth.
Yeah.
Makes it feel a lot more attainable.
I'm with you. It's not just for like scientists in a lab, And I think that's what's so great about this protocols book that's coming out. He's basically giving us this roadmap, but we get to choose where we want to go with it.
Totally. But like for someone listening who's maybe feeling a little overwhelmed by it all,
Right.
right? Where do they even start?
That's the question, isn't it? Honestly, I think it comes down to figuring out what really speaks to you. What part of your life are you most wanting to like level up?
Right. Is it sleep? Is it how much energy you have?
Yeah,
Focus?
exactly. Pick the protocol that fits that need. It's like choosing your own superpower.
Huh. I like that. And it's not like you have to do everything at once either. Huberman talks about starting small, right?
Yeah.
Building those habits up over time.
Exactly. It's a marathon, not a sprint, as they say. And it's wild to think that Huberman's own journey, from skateboarding to therapy, all of that led him to this point.
It really goes to show you that even someone like him, who's at the top of his field, they've still had their own challenges, their own stuff to figure out.
100%. It's almost reassuring, in a way. Growth and change are always happening for all of us.
Truth.
Yeah.
So as we're kind of wrapping up our deep dive into Andrew Huberman's world here, what's the big takeaway? What do you want people to remember most?
You have more power than you realize, like literally over your own brain, your body, your life. That's what Huberman's showing us. He's giving us the knowledge, the tools. Now it's up to us to actually use them.
Become the architect of your own potential. Love it.
Right. So on that note, think about what resonated with you most from everything we talked about today. What's one thing, even if it's small, that you can start incorporating into your life? You never know what kind of transformations might happen.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And hey, who knows? Maybe we'll even do a follow-up on this down the road, see how those protocols are treating everyone. But until then, thanks for joining us for another deep dive.